So this is Louis, otherwise known as the frayed voice man, the man with the loud fan in his desktop that I need to clean again, apparently, because it's making noise. But more importantly, I busted out my legal pad, so we are here to talk about yesterday's protest. And I see a lot of people calling it a riot and other such things. No, I would advise all you listening to this to be more professional, especially those in the media, be more professional, and use the AP-style guide, which says that this was a protest. So I am here to tell you that yesterday there was a protest, not a riot, not anything else. I mean, you sound like a racist when you say something other than a protest, because according to the AP, it was a protest, definitionally. So, there was a protest yesterday where some Trump supporters entered the Capitol building and mostly just walked around. There were some bad things that happened, and I'm going to talk about those bad things. But in large part, some Trump protesters entered the Capitol building and stood around, waved flags, chanted, and then riot police came in and they left. But there were some bad things that happened that we're going to cover. However, before we cover it, I got my handy-dandy legal pad. We're going to go through what happened. So, protesters broke through the police line in front of the Capitol building. The protesters then celebrated on the steps of the Capitol building. When that happened, Congress was evacuated, I believe, from the floor of the House. I'm not 100% sure. I believe that's where they were evacuated, because that was sealed off, even when they were already gone. The protesters forced their way into the Capitol building. The protesters walked around the Capitol building. The protesters entered offices of some politicians, including Nancy Pelosi and at least one member of the Senate, I want to say. The protesters entered the floor of the Senate and were blockaded at gunpoint from the floor of the House. So they didn't get in there because a bunch of federal agents or Capitol policemen had them at gunpoint. They barricaded the door so they couldn't get in there, but they managed to get into the floor of the Senate and, walk around. There's some footage of them walking around. Protesters were barricaded out of specific sections of the building, including the floor of the House, and deadly force was used to protect those areas. One of the protesters by the name of Ashley Babbitt attempted to climb through one of the windows of one of the barricaded sections of the building and was shot in the neck by, I believe, a policeman and killed. Eventually, the riot police arrived and the protesters were forced out of the building. A few hours later, Congress resumed the certification of the fraudulent national election. So that was the end of the story of what happened yesterday. And what we are going to do, for the sake of the arguments, and to negate some of the hyperbole that I saw all over the place on Twitter, and we're going to be talking about that, we're going to compare this to the Black Lives Matter riots of last year in D.C. Those riots, I believe, went on for 5 days. They started in May and then carried into June. It may have started May 28th to June 4th. I'm not quite sure of the exact timeline, but right around then. End of May and into June. It was like a business week of rioting. For the Trump supporters who entered the Capitol building, did they commit arson? No. Was there a night of mass violence or nights of mass violence? No. Was there looting? Well, the Trump supporters picked up a podium, and one Trump supporter apparently took a mail parcel, or a parcel of mail, from Nancy Pelosi's office. Were there hate crimes? No. Was there vandalism? Yes. There was some folders scattered in one office. Some windows were broken, and some media equipment was vandalized. Let's compare that to what happened last year during the Black Lives Matter riots. Was there arson? Yes, there was mass arson. Were there nights of mass violence? Yes, every single night there was mass violence on the streets. Was there looting? Yes, there was mass looting. Were there hate crimes? Yes, there were many hate crimes. Was there vandalism? Yes, there was mass vandalism. There is no equitable comparison between what happened last year during the summer with Black Lives Matter in D.C. and what happened yesterday with the Trump supporters. There is no equitable comparison. It is not a fair comparison. Because, like I said, no arson, no nights of violence, 2 instances of perhaps theft, no hate crimes, some vandalism. I have 3 instances of vandalism from yesterday, compared to nights of arson, mass violence for several days, mass looting for several days, numerous instances of hate crimes, numerous and untold amounts of vandalism over several days, a business week of rioting. I see people making the boneheaded, erroneous comparison to the 2018 Kavanaugh protests. I don't know why you're doing that. That is self-defeating. It was an AstroTurf event, and the worst that happened then, as far as I remember, was some small instances of vandalism and a lot of littering. That seems to be the big thing with that particular protest of the Kavanaugh protest. Littering was the big thing that happened then for that AstroTurf event. But that's about it. So don't make that comparison. It's self-defeating. The reason I said all that was for the purposes of pointing to this tweet that I made, which says, if this is terrorism, describe to me what Black Lives Matter did last summer. So this is a question I don't have to answer. I condemned Black Lives Matter rioting all last year. I did numerous videos talking about it, and I condemned it in strong terms each and every time. I will repeat that nothing that happened yesterday is in any way comparable to what happened last year. It is not a fair comparison. It is not an equitable comparison. There is no moral equivalence between what happened yesterday and what happened last year. There is no fair comparison that you can make. Anyone who's arguing that these events were in any way comparable are engaging in dishonest rhetorical nonsense. You're engaging in a bad faith argument because on its face, objectively, there is no comparison between the two. There is no comparison between what was done from yesterday to what was done last year for several days, a business week of rioting. There's no comparison, there's no fair comparison that you can make between those events. You are simply doing so in a wholly dishonest fashion for the sake of an argument you know is dishonest. People with hundreds of thousands of followers, millions of followers, just making that comparison. Entire media outlets writing entire freaking wall of text articles trying to equivocate around what happened last year with Black Lives Matter and what happened yesterday. And I want an answer to my tweet. I want an answer to the tweet that I put out there of if dumping over some folders in some random fucking asshole's office is terrorism, then what did Black Lives Matter commit last year for several days? Give me an answer. Before you get on to, calling every Trump supporter a terrorist, and we're going to get to what they were called in a minute here. Before we get on to that, and your hyperbole, I need you to explain to me what Black Lives Matter did last year. Tell me that first before we get on to condemning the Trump supporters. It's required that you give me that explanation before you can move on to condemn anybody. Okay? The amount of apologia and equivocation about what happened last year was nothing but the entire narrative around the riots. So give me your opinion of what happened last year, or shut the fuck up. So moving on, we have a few things that I would like to say, just some bullet points. The other side is full of liars and knowing hypocrites. You could, get that from what I've been saying. Every corporation in America is throwing billions of dollars at Black Lives Matter. Every corporation in America is going to discriminate against us. And I have a tweet that I don't have in front of me from a user called Patriot J, which I'm just going to put on screen and just leave there for a second and not say anything. moving on. Here's some things that I wrote down. The reason that I'm doing this video is to preempt the universal condemnation by so-called hardcore, big dick partisan conservatives that are thoughtlessly denouncing their own side without making a fair assessment of the actions taken yesterday and the moral consideration that they deserve. That is the reason why I'm doing this video. It's not to apologize for anyone. It's not to equivocate about what happened yesterday. It's to say that I'm expecting today, as of this recording, for a lot of so-called big dick conservatives, people who think that they're real men, real champions of the right, I expect universal condemnation of this protest from yesterday. That is what I'm expecting. Because every sign from yesterday evening shows that that's going to happen today. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to condemn this protest because I believe it was, in fact, a protest. And I don't just mean in the way of me being cheeky and pithy about the AP style guide. I really do mean that this was just a protest. I also wrote, so-called conservatives spent all evening during the protest condemning all the protesters, those who entered the Capitol building just in itself, and those who engaged in bad behavior as, altogether, quote, terrorists, insurrectionists, white supremacists, rioters, revolutionaries, secessionists, traitors, and engaging in sedition, end quote. I just fucked this up because I went on a stupid tangent about unions, so I'm going to start all over again. I wrote down, the protest was said to be worse or the moral equivalent to, quote, and these are all quotes from multiple sources, and I'm not going to post their shit, fuck them. This is worse than, or the moral equivalent to, Pearl Harbor, the Iraq War, 9/11, Charlottesville, violence towards scabs by union members. I'm not going to say anything more than just that, but it was from multiple unions. The whole of the BLM riots, the whole of Antifa riots, the Canadians burning down the White House, and many more. There were many more comparisons, but I'm not getting into any more than just what I've written down because I think these were the most hyperbolic or most hypocritical. The most hypocritical coming from the fucking unions. In response to this, I mocked this on Twitter, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to post this tweet or not. I said that this was the moral equivalence or worse than the crucifixion of Christ. Obviously, I'm saying that with the intention of mocking these people, because this is nothing more than the worst hyperbole that you can ever imagine. No one said anything about the Holocaust, which I'm surprised by. It's worse than 9/11 and all these other things, but no one said anything about the Holocaust. So at least there's that. No one went that far, at least as of yet. But I guess we'll just wait and see. To Trump supporters, to activists, to the activists that participated in the protest yesterday in the Capitol building, here is some strongly put advice that I want everyone to adhere to. Everyone on our side should be adhering to these things. Don't attack the police, throw things at police, mace them, or otherwise menace them. This is illegal and morally wrong. Should not do this. Don't steal anything from anyone. Put down the podium and put Nancy Pelosi's mail back where you found it. Stealing is morally wrong and it is illegal. Don't do it. Don't vandalize buildings, even public ones. Vandalizing buildings is illegal, or vandalism is illegal, and it is morally wrong. Don't do it. Finally, fuck the media. They get what they incite themselves. And to quote Patriot Games,
I will fucking destroy you. I will make it my mission in life.
That is pretty much all I had to say about this. It's everything I wrote down on my legal pad. If I wanted to, I could spend the next hour talking your ear off about the protest and my moral argument surrounding it. I did that in a stream. I did that on Twitter. I could continue doing it here. But in all honesty, I don't want to. I don't think it's necessary. I said what I had to say about any comparisons to things in the past, to what happened yesterday. I said what I found wrong with what happened with the protesters, the behavior they engaged in. I already called out exactly what they did wrong. But the fact is, what occurred yesterday in the Capitol building was a protest. It was not an astroturfed event by the DNC and the media. It was not an event where you had strict organization, a plan for marching here or marching there or doing this or doing that. It was not something that there was anything that you could call structure. There was nothing that you can compare it to that would be a fair comparison, even for other right-wing events. This was something that was an actual protest. You had people engage in a behavior that was chaotic, that was unruly. They breached the police line. They entered the Capitol building. They marched around. They chanted. They went to the floor of the Senate. They chanted there. They, walked around some. They went into some office. They made some crank calls on Nancy Pelosi's phone line. So the riot police came in. They left. Some people engaged in bad behavior. Some people vandalized the building. Some random boomer stole a parcel of mail, a mail parcel, from Nancy Pelosi's office. And one protester lost her life for trying to get through the window of a barricaded door. You have to try and separate your emotional reaction to something to what actually occurred. You getting all whipped up and screaming and engaging in hyperbole and all this nonsense, I find it really exhausting. Not rage-inducing or anything other than just exhausting. To see somebody who, I think it was, what's his name, Eric Erickson, something like that. One of these right-wing pundits, I'm pretty sure, he's one of these people who freaking lost their mind yesterday. I can't even post the tweet because I'm pretty sure it either got taken down or deleted or whatever, but I can't post it even if I could because YouTube would flag my channel. He just outright called for the murder of protesters. No distinction, no separation, no justification, just kill the protesters. That was the tweet. Forget the laws, forget anything, just murder these people. Didn't say who, just the protesters who were at the Capitol building. Just open fire, murder them. That's what he advocated. And it's like, man, with friends like these, this is supposed to be a right-winger, and he's out there being like, yeah, murder all these right-wingers. It's like, well, great. We ought to just leave it for the left wing to say that, because I'm pretty sure a lot of them were advocating that yesterday, too. I just didn't see it. But we could do without right-wingers calling for mass murder of Trump supporters. A little bit immoral, if you ask me. A little bit irrational. For the sake of brevity, I will leave it there. Thank you for listening.